did you have bifidobacteria before you took the probiotic? Because if you did, you didn't need the probiotic. They're competing with your own probiotics. And therefore, you're possibly killing your own
Oh,
bifidobacteria. And here's the problem is we tend to do too much as patients. We tend to work by fear. As humans, we work on fear. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, I was fearful of the virus, so I took hydroxychloroquine, right? And it killed my microbiome. It took me a year and a half to restore my microbiome. What did I learn from there? I learned, well, hydroxychloroquine does kill the virus, which is great for people that have zero bifidobacteria, but not so great for someone that has bifidobacteria.
Welcome to Cancer Bites. Bold voices, big insights, and unstoppable energy. Because cancer doesn't get the last word.
hi, and welcome to Cancer Bites. I'm Siobhan Shaw, and I am the creator of this podcasting community. We are taking a bite out of cancer. There's straight talk, real people, tears, laughter, and high hopes. So the big question is, what if the answers to cancer are hiding in your poop? Seriously, we are going to talk shit. And the author of Let's Talk Shit is with us today. She is an award-winning gastroenterologist and physician scientist. And Dr. Sabine Hazan, thank you so much for sharing time with us so that we can learn what is hidden in our poop. I know, I feel like a kid, like,
I know it's that term that you don't want to say because it's bad, but
I know.
the reality is everybody has some and everybody pays attention to it. So let's just be honest with it and talk about it.
That's right. You know, I think the more that we talk about our bodily functions, the more we understand them, and the more maybe we can be aware of things that pop up from
Hmm.
time to time. Now, this conversation really matters, I think, because these paradigm shifting ideas are key to understanding and possibly preventing cancer. Because you're saying it's not in our DNA. Everybody
Well,
says if you have
I'm
breast
not
cancer
saying
in your
it's
family,
not. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying it may be in our DNA and somewhere else. It may be genetics and it may be microbiome and it may be both. And so we need to pay attention to everything.
yeah, because I've noticed a lot of people that since I've had cancer, they've been telling me I haven't been eating right. They tell me somehow I'm to blame, that my body is weak. And I actually am one of the strongest people around. I farm, I grew up in a farm. I'm fairly healthy. I didn't know I had cancer. I thought I had allergies.
What
So
kind of cancer did you have?
I have breast cancer, metastatic, stage 4.
Wow.
Yeah, you're going to go big. You that's it. That's
I
what you
mean,
want to have.
a lot of women out there have breast cancer. You have, you know, it's part that's why we do all the testing we do, and this is why we do, mammography, ultrasound, MRI, palpation, physical exam, because you want to detect it early and not wait till it becomes a stage 4. But unfortunately, breast cancer has gone up. When I was in the 80s, we didn't see as many women. Now, did we not diagnose them properly? Maybe, but I tend to think that something's happened to humanity that is changing all these cancers. And we are seeing a lot more cancer, a lot more pancreatic cancer, a lot more colon cancer in the young, especially. So, what are
Yeah.
we doing to the young that they're developing colon cancer at the age of 30 or 29, or 18? I had an 18-year-old with colon cancer. So, when do you, the guidelines basically used to call for colonoscopy at 50. Now they've moved it down to 45, but we are picking it up at 18. So, it's malpractice to actually have a kid that comes in with rectal bleed and not do a colonoscopy.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's needed. And I think it is because we are seeing a lot more. So, my interest is really the microbiome, because what is happening to the microbiome of humanity that is allowing all these cancers to start growing? I have a theory, which is that basically that we are killing good microbes and therefore allowing other bad microbes to come in. And I think also cancer, there's going to be a time in the future where we're going to discover that all cancers are microbiome related, or a microbe, right? Think about Epstein-Barr virus with Burkitt's lymphoma. Think about HPV with cervical cancer. Think about H. pylori with gastric cancer. So we're starting to see signals in the microbiome space with GIST tumors, with pancreatic cancer. We're actually testing pancreatic cancer patients, their stools, and we're doing it for free. So anybody that has pancreatic cancer, please call ProgenaBiome.com, because we are testing your stools to try to identify a signal, because in my opinion, pancreatic cancer is one of the worst out there. Mainly because it's right in the abdomen, it's right next to the liver. So it's a direct access to metastases, So it's very difficult to pick up an early pancreatic cancer. So I think if we can pick it up with a microbiome signal to begin with, we're ahead of the game. So
Perfect. So, when I got diagnosed, which was just 7 months ago, I was shocked because it's not something that runs in my family. Not at all. I have three sisters older than me, my mother, grandmothers, aunts, no, I guess men get it too. We've had men on the show that have had breast cancer, but I was not expecting it. And somehow here I am, doing what I do to bring more knowledge to people, but in a relaxed and fun way, and looking at the things like the research that you're doing. And I don't think we've told everybody that you are the CEO of Ventura Clinical Trials and the founder of ProgenaBiome, right?
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
ProgenaBiome.
And it's a state-of-the-art lab that is on the quest for healthcare revolution. And I was looking in your website, and you said you are looking for potential stool donors. Are those the ones for the pancreatic cancer that you're looking for?
We're looking. We have 67 protocols on the microbiome and various diseases. So one of them is pancreatic cancer. Part of the reason that I'm looking for pancreatic cancer is, I've done a few clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies on pancreatic cancer. I've seen some good results with some products that never really made it to market, where, they needed to do more patients, but the company ran out of money to do more patients. So the product never really made it to market. I've also seen other products that are right now in clinical trials that are doing something, and they're doing something to the pancreatic cancer, but they're also doing something to the microbiome. So that's what kind of got me interested to begin with pancreatic cancer. But also, other cancers, GIST tumors, we believe we've picked up a signal in GIST tumors, which would be incredible, because that's a difficult cancer of the abdomen to pick up. Breast cancer, as you talk about breast cancer, we've seen something, okay, which I'd love to analyze your stools, by the way. So you're welcome to contact ProgenaBiome.com, and then I'll connect you with Ginger, who basically will send you a kit. Because then we can put you on our list of all the breast cancer we're picking up, right? So we're looking at breast cancer, we're looking at GIST tumors, we're looking at ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. I drive my scientists crazy because I tend to jump ship a lot. I go from one thing to another, and they're like, Dr. Hazan, 1 minute you're on autism, another you're on Crohn's, another you're on Alzheimer's. Unfortunately, the microbiome space, you have to be that person. You have to be that person that's jumping from one disease to another, because all diseases have a signature, and every individual has a signature, and every family has a signature, and every race, culture, location, region has a signature. So you have to be that person that can kind of see it all and just pick up the signals with your brain and say, wait a minute, I saw this somewhere. Oh, yeah, I saw it in this, and I saw it in this. So you can't really, for a person that's in a box, they're in that box. They can't see past that box. So they cannot see the microbiome, right? They need to see Crohn's disease one way. They need to see ulcerative colitis one way. But think about what all these diseases have. It all starts in the gut, right? Think about cancer. When you're treating a cancer, you're giving chemotherapy, you're affecting the gut. Then people start having infections because the gut is affected. And the way, people end up dying from cancers is really from the infectious process that they had, right? So it's an infection that usually, ends up killing the person. It's not necessarily the chemo, but it's the chemo that killed the microbiome. So we really need to look at all of it. When you look at people with Parkinson's disease, for example, it starts 20 years prior with constipation and gas and bloating. And then it starts with the shuffling gait, the rigidity, there's signs that come on, but it started way back at the microbiome level. So I think when you start seeing that all diseases begin in the gut, then you start saying, okay, well, what does Crohn's have in common with autism, right? If you look at autistic children and you follow the work of Dr. Krigsman and Dr. Walker from Wake Forest University, and you notice that basically some kids with autism have a microscopic colitis. They have inflammation in the colon, which is similar to Crohn's disease. So here you go, you're looking at Crohn's disease and you're looking at autism, and now you're seeing a certain group of patients that have the same microbes as Crohn's disease and the same microbe as autism, right? And so you could put them together and say, well, this is my subset of patients that look like Crohn's disease. I don't need to do a colonoscopy to look for the microscopic colitis. Maybe those patients are really Crohn's disease, and maybe autism is a secondary manifestation of Crohn's disease to begin with. Now, maybe those people need biologics to get treated, right? Maybe they have an infection that I can remove. Maybe they have a loss of microbiome that I can replenish. So this is how you start looking at diseases. So same with Parkinson's. Imagine a person that is constipated, and you can pick up something early on in Parkinson's, a missing microbiome, missing microbes, an overgrowth of certain microbes, that secrete certain products that create toxins that goes to the vagal nerve, that goes to the brain, that creates that shuffling gait, that creates that rigidity, that brain function that happens late in the stage, that dementia, that happens late in the stage of patients with Parkinson's. So I think it's important to start at the beginning and to kind of know. So to me, I'm the girl that used to do clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies. One trial after, I would be very proud that I was on the cutting edge. And what happened was it got redundant. It was one biologic for Crohn's, one biologic for ulcerative colitis, one biologic for psoriasis, one biologic. So basically, it was one thing after another. And I just felt like, why are we not fixing these diseases? Why are we not understanding these diseases? And why are we just pushing one drug after another? And, you know, why is the population getting younger and younger that gets inflammatory bowel disease and needs biologics? And to me, I'm all about quality of life, and I prefer quality to quantity. Don't give me 100 years where I'm in a wheelchair. Give me, 40, 50 years where I'm, vibrant and I can go on a mountain and hike and appreciate nature, right? So I think to me, when I look at a kid with Crohn's disease at 4 years old, the idea that they're going to see a doctor once a month for an injectable or once every 6 weeks for an injectable for the rest of their lives, to me, that's not what I would want for me. And I'm sure that's not what the parents would want for their kids. So there's got to be, so early on in my career, as I was doing clinical trials and being on this cutting edge practice of medicine, doing clinical trials, you know, I came to realize there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to fix Crohn's disease. There's got to be a better way to fix ulcerative colitis, to fix breast cancer, to fix pancreatic cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. So that's why I kind of embarked. This was a big jump for me. Mainly it was expensive. It was all my savings. It was something that I had worked a long time doing clinical trials and therefore raising money from pharmaceutical companies doing their clinical trials. And then using that money to basically say, okay, it's time to do the right thing now. I remember, it's like midlife crisis. My midlife crisis was, I've done well in my life. Let's now give back. Let's now do the right thing. Let's now see something else. And I think for me, COVID really, pushed me to that limit. At the beginning it was a fun little project, right? Spent a couple million, developed a lab, figured, I'll just raise money and bring, one assay to the market and figure out all these diseases. But then somewhere along the line, I realized I was put on this path to really create a healthcare revolution. And I think COVID for me was the beginning of that healthcare revolution. When I created ProgenaBiome, the logo on the box is a quest for a healthcare revolution. And that was really what I felt, right? I felt we're not fixing these diseases. There's got to be better. And it's time to take back medicine and see better and do better and be unbiased and try to be as righteous as possible in the scientific world, not being biased by money, not being biased by prizes, Nobel prizes, or be biased by fame or be biased by an academic position, right? So I felt, how do I do this? Well, I have to look at it. I have to use my money to see, because I'm not the girl that's going to sell something that's just not truthful. I have to sleep at night. Part of the thing, when I was doing clinical trials for pharma was I was, a vigilant doctor for the FDA, because if a drug is good, it goes to market. That's the best we have right now. If a drug is bad and killing people, it doesn't go to market. I'm sorry. We need to report this. I think to me, COVID woke me up to that. It showed me the corruption. I think it showed everyone. And it really was a healthcare revolution. The problem is now, I can't sell out, right? I got to keep going because I'm already embarked in this. I always say I could be wrong, prove me wrong. I don't know. I honestly jumped into this with the best intention to see life, to see what happens when we die, what happens when we approach dying, what is our microbiome looking like? Seeing the loss of bifidobacteria from a newborn to an aging person, seeing the disappearance of bifidobacteria, from before COVID to now after COVID, seeing, the effects of the vaccines on the microbiome, seeing the messenger RNA vaccine, not all vaccines, seeing the effects of medications on the microbiome, the effects of hydroxychloroquine on the microbiome, ivermectin on the microbiome, seeing, Paxlovid on the microbiome. All these kind of like pointed me to a direction. Now, it could be a rabbit hole, but I'm willing to go down that path. Because I feel I'm looking at it with the eyes of I want to live a long time and I want to have a quality of life. And the only way that I can do that is to be, the right path and to call a spade a spade.
I
So,
love that. You and
yeah.
I are very much aligned.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, we could all be that patient, right? I could be in your shoes right now. I could be in the shoes of a patient with Alzheimer's that doesn't remember his daughter's date of birth. So it doesn't help me to not be righteous. It doesn't help me you know, to not go this path. This is a path that was driven, that was, this was a path that was given to me. I really believe from divine intervention. It was all, I see angels. There's angels coming at me different ways, people that come in to help me at different levels. This is not an easy path. This was a very hard path for me. This was challenging. This was a path where at some points it would have been easier to take a license to get money and sell a stool sample as a consumer product and make millions. It would have been easier to sell a patent for COVID treatment, for 10 million, or even to sell my lab for 185 million. It would have been easier. But here's the problem. When you do that, you kill the research. You're now biased, and now nobody's going to listen to you because they're like, well, she just created that to make 185 million. So this was a challenge for me to kind of say no to all that. It was also a disagreement that I had even with my husband, because he felt I was working, I was spending my time, I was spending money, and I wasn't really, you know, I should have made money, And so it was a disagreement, but I felt that it was a sacrifice that I took. It was a gamble. It was and it was a risk. It was a lot of risk, right? When you go into a pandemic, not knowing anything about a virus, how it was manipulated, how it was created, what was the sequence of it, and then discovering on a gut feeling that that virus is in the stools and telling my scientists we're looking at COVID in the stools. And he was freaked out at the beginning, right? He was like, I don't want to deal with COVID. And I said, we're in COVID right now. He's like, no, we're in Crohn's. I go, no, we're not in Crohn's. We're in COVID. Forget Crohn's. So, jumping in, risking my lab, risking my employees, exposed to thousands of patients and being here to talk about it, right? Seeing the microbiome, seeing COVID in the stools, seeing the loss of bifidobacteria in severe COVID patients, seeing that bifidobacteria improves with vitamin C short term, improves with ivermectin short term, seeing that loss of bifidobacteria occurred in autistic kids, occurred in patients with Alzheimer's, occurred in Lyme disease, Crohn's disease, invasive cancer, right? When you look at invasive cancer patients like you have to say, what's your bifidobacteria level? That's why I want to look at your stools. What's your bifidobacteria level? Where did you kill? At what point did you kill your bifidobacteria that you cannot grow it back? And how do you grow it back while killing the tumor that's in your breast and all over your body, right?
Well, that's very interesting because I was taking probiotics. I don't, they have different names for them. I won't say brand names or anything, but I was taking all those supplements. I was eating really well. I mean, I don't eat badly. I don't go to fast food, I don't get a lot of greasy food. Oh, and now with chemo, I can't eat the greasy stuff anyway. So I'm really eating well. And what I find interesting is that you are talking about the connection between the gut and cancer and autism and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Now, I may not have any cancer in my family. My father had leukemia, but he had a full blood transfusion during World War II. He lost his leg. So who knows whose blood he actually, got. Yeah, it wasn't his
And
own,
and
obviously.
what did that blood carry?
And what did it carry? So
Right,
I look at him as an anomaly, right? Like
right.
it's not his DNA. It was the condition of World War II, and he had that full on blood transfusion. But you're talking about some really interesting things. My mother had
But
Alzheimer's.
here's one question.
Mhm.
It may not be just a blood transfusion. It may be the toxicity from the war. It
Oh,
may be the explosions, the fumes, the pollution that occurred in the war. It may be the stress factor of being at war, right?
yes.
Killing other humans,
Okay.
right?
All right. And he actually had shrapnel in his body, like in his stump and he would
Yeah,
show
so it's
me. They eventually took
multifactorial.
some of it out because it was pressing on nerves and things like that, but he had this little thing of shrapnel. And so yes, you're right. So but when I look at, my mother had Alzheimer's, I have a sibling with end stage Parkinson's and dementia. My grandfather had Parkinson's. Now, what you're saying to me is that it's not a far cry that you have cancer, Siobhan.
Yeah,
This is
let me
maybe
just
all
tell
connected,
you. Let me
right?
just tell you.
Okay.
So, some microbes are pathogenic for Parkinson's, and those same microbes are pathogenic for cancer. So it is very possible. I always ask the history of kids with autism, right? I always say, do you have a family history of Alzheimer's? Because Alzheimer's and autism are very similar. I always say Alzheimer's is the autism of the old, and autism is the Alzheimer's of the young. It's the same, you know, spectrum disorders, right?
Mhm.
Initially in both, when you start looking at both diseases, right? Um, and it is the same microbes too often in both, in certain people, certain families, okay? It's complex, but yes, there are people. Here's the biggest, the most complex thing is that you can have a microbe that is high in a person and that person will never have cancer, Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's. And that microbe could be in another person and that other person develops cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, right? Why is that? Because we all evolve as, and not to be, racist or, I'm just saying regionally, in regions around the world, not to say
Yes.
races, because when you start mentioning races in this world, you become like, you have all sorts of words around you. When you look at different regions of the world, Amazon jungle, China, Mexico, Japan, they all have different microbes, different agriculture. They all eat different foods, right? They've adapted to that food. They've adapted to that environment, right? Now you transplant a person from Venezuela and you put them in America or you put them in the Amazon jungle or you put them in China. They're
Yep.
going to start having problems, right? This is what I've been observing for the last 31 years of doing GI is Mexican person that starts eating sushi all of a sudden gets digestive problem. Why? Well, sushi is not part of his environment. He's not used to eating a raw fish that's full of parasites. Now, you look at a Japanese person that has been raised on sushi and raw fish, that person is surviving the parasites. So it doesn't need to destroy anything because it's alive with its parasite, it's in its environment, right? Now you look at a person in the Amazon jungle who doesn't have cancer, doesn't have heart disease, doesn't have autism. They have an enormous amount of microbes in them, right? Those microbes, they're resilient to the environment. They're living in the environment. Now you put me or you in the Amazon jungle, you're going to have all sorts of infections because you lack the diversity, you lack the adaptation, the resilience that occurs, right? So it's really about resilience. And here's the big problem, because people always say to me, well, why don't I take Amazon jungle and put it into a person that is lacking microbes? You can't do that because that person has not adapted to the environment. It's a shock. It's like I'm putting a bunch of microbes like, Babesia, which causes Lyme disease and tuberculosis and all that in your gut. Now all of a sudden your body's like, holy cow,
Yeah.
I'm dead,
Yeah.
because I've never seen these microbes, right? It's like me giving you peanuts and all of a sudden you get a peanut allergy because you've never been able to eat peanuts, right? So I think we got to be careful. And I think, the way I look at it is the way I look at it now is people in the family carry microbes, right?
Right.
And when they destroy their good bacteria, those microbes start flourishing, okay? So you look at someone like, and that's why to me it's like when I see people in their environment, when I see people, their family history is so important because it gives me a clue. So your clue was that. Now I will tell you, because you brought up an important, an important fact or an important question. You said to me, well, I did everything right. I took the prebiotic and I took the probiotic. Here's the big problem. You were raised on a farm. You were raised in an environment that was hopefully free of pesticide. Was it free of pesticide? Yes.
Now I'd have to, well, I can't ask. I could
Because
ask
if
my
it
brother,
wasn't
but
free of pesticide, there's your first clue, right?
so I do believe they probably sprayed something on the corn fields.
Yes.
But
So you
my mom
probably
probably wouldn't have
inhaled that.
sprayed anything on the vegetable gardens or anything like that. Yeah. So we
So
had well water, mm,
yeah,
and
I
this
mean,
was a
everything
long
goes in the
time ago.
well,
Yeah.
right? Everything goes deep. The pesticides go
Yeah.
deep into the water and then accumulate, and then you're drinking it. So that's one. Number two, did you have bifidobacteria before you took the probiotic? Because if you did, you didn't need the probiotic. They're competing with your own probiotics. And therefore, you're possibly killing your own
Oh,
bifidobacteria. And here's the problem is we tend to do too much as patients. We tend to work by fear. As humans, we work on fear. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, I was fearful of the virus, so I took hydroxychloroquine, right? And it killed my microbiome. It took me a year and a half to restore my microbiome. What did I learn from there? I learned, well, hydroxychloroquine does kill the virus, which is great for people that have zero bifidobacteria, but not so great for someone that has bifidobacteria. Same thing with the vaccine. The vaccine was probably good for those people that are overweight, diabetics, killed their bifidobacteria because now they need a piece of it to recognize the virus that's coming. But here's the problem for the babies who already have bifidobacteria and we're getting a sneeze from being exposed to COVID, or someone that has bifidobacteria that just is exposed to COVID and then gets diarrhea, and flushes it out on their own, then it's not necessarily, a good thing. So we have to be careful. And this is where a good stool sample, a good stool assay is important. But here's the problem: you have to map the microbiome to understand. You have to understand the microbiome. You have to understand, where should I see and find the microbiome that it's valid, verified, and reproducible. It's like I'm in space and I'm trying to find Mars, but I'm just floating because I don't know where Mars is. But if somebody gives me the coordinates of Mars, I can keep going back and forth every time and take
Mhm.
my samples of Mars, which in fact, I'd love to work with NASA because I know they are putting poop in space, but are they putting
I
the
love
right
it.
poop in space is what I want to know. So, anybody
Let's
that's
talk to them.
listening,
Let's get a
let's
hold of them somehow.
let's hashtag NASA project.
Hashtag NASA today. I love the idea that this could be just your gut that is causing all these troubles. And you were talking about we'll call it heritage, or where our our ancestry is from. I have that whole European side, why I have blonde hair, pale
Blue
skin,
eyes, yes.
blue eyes, but it's actually the blue eyes, blonde hair that is part of the indigenous line. And they would have arrived here from Siberia, Nepal, those areas, because if you look at my great grandmother, she looks like that. And I have very little hair on my body, which is, I believe, a trait of the Nepalese, that's how you
Mhm.
say. Um, so my ancestry on my indigenous side, and nobody could tell that I'm indigenous by my skin color, but that ancestry, what what was their microbiome? And and I remember when I was much, much younger, remember they, I don't know,
And
was
were
it
they darker?
blood type, yes, blood type, the blood type diets or whatever. I remember doing one of those tests and they said I should be eating blubber, like
Wow.
full on fat, because there's something in my, well, I
The
don't even know,
problem
I guess
with
in
the
my blood
problem
that says, hey, your indigenous ancestry is actually controlling your body somehow, as opposed to this sort of European, French, Dutch, British,
right.
Irish, whatever. Um, I'm wondering because all my siblings, of course, my dad wasn't indigenous. He didn't have indigenous heritage. Um, but all of my siblings do. My mother, and all
I mean,
her
this is
line.
why I look at the microbiome of families, right? Because it tells me, you know, when you look at families, you can kind of see who resembles who. Like my own family portrait, I talk about that. I resemble my oldest daughter, and my youngest one resembles my husband. They resemble each other in their personalities, like they're both crying at movies, and they resemble each other with their microbiome. Me and my oldest daughter were very rebellious. We're very like, type A personality. We resemble each other in our microbiome, but also in our personalities. So, you know, I think that's when you start seeing the similarities within the family. And there's
Uh,
also this, what's fascinating about, the whole family is that there's compatibility that occurs, right? One sibling is compatible with the other.
hmm,
One one parent is compatible with the other, husband and wife are compatible or not compatible, right?
right.
Um, which is kind of a funny story.
So I'm just trying to look because you're just saying I have all these wonderful pictures of my family because we're doing a gift guide for Cancer Bites, and it's called Gifts That Whisper I Love You. And this particular brand has given me the opportunity to take a lot of my family photos and turn them into something. So I'm going to show you. Here is, now, of course, it's the last. My grandfather. And I know that there's a picture of him and a painting of him, and we look exactly alike.
Wow.
We look
Wow.
exactly alike. Now, this is my indigenous great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother,
Wow.
and her daughter, and my mom.
Wow.
My mom was blonde haired and blue eyed, like she was very fair. Like I at least
Wow.
have a little skin tone. So these people, this is my ancestry. Here's who I look like. This one. If
Yeah.
if you
So
saw
it
in
is
the picture,
possible
so
that you inherited his microbes too and his DNA.
yeah, because I, when you're talking about autism, I am I was born in the 60s, so autism is not something they they checked us for. But I was like, pretty butterfly. Like my attention span is that of an ant some days. And I find large crowds and lots of noise and shrill voices. Oh, disgrading, right? So I may have some of that autistic um,
Well, I mean, when we
style,
talk
we'll
about it,
call
I,
it.
I think I think autism is really a spectrum. When I talk about autism, for me, it's the kids that really don't speak, don't verbalize, have problems
Mm,
verbalizing. To me, that's the autism picture. I think we all have variants of spectrum. I'm not sure that they're really disorders as much as they are ADHD, lack of focus, over focused. I mean, it's just different personalities, different groups of microbes, probably, because we see that when we fix kids with ADHD or spectrum disorders, they're calmer when you decrease some of those microbes that are causing them the problem. And then you also see with diet, you change the diet, you stop the sugars, and these kids are much better. So is it a sugar, problem that's stimulating the bad microbes? That's the problem. So, I think ultimately it's all in the gut. When we die, those microbes are taking over the gut. The process, we are just here on this planet for a short time to learn a lesson, to do our job, to focus on what we're supposed to do. We may not know what we're supposed to do, but it'll be defined for you at some point. Look, I didn't know I was going to be, part of this healthcare revolution on the microbiome. When I was 5 years old, I asked God and I used to pray and say, where do we come from and where do we die, and where do we go after we die? And God took me on this path into the microbiome, because microbes in your gut are eating the skin, are eating the bones, are decomposing you back into the earth, and therefore you're are you coming back that way? Is the soul traveling underground? Who knows? But there's definitely some truth to the fact that we are born with a lot of good microbes, and then with life, with choices we make, from diets to medications to drugs to alcohol, we alter that microbiome. And then that microbiome, the good bugs disappear and the bad bugs take over, which is essentially returning us back into the earth where we came from. So, I think it all circulates. To look at the human body as one is a mistake. I think, the gut microbes circulate. Microbes you put in your skin end up in your gut. Medications you put in your skin end up destroying or healing your gut. I think we just need to be more conscientious of not only the whole body as one, but all of humanity as one, and all of humanity embedded in the planet and in the earth. So when you start going out, from me, which it's not
mhm.
about me. I'm just a speck in a universe, right? I'm nothing. Okay. When you start going back and saying, I'm nothing, but then all of humanity itself is nothing. And all of humanity cannot survive without the dirt and the planet and the oxygen and the water. Therefore, the planet itself. And now you go into the whole universe, and now you see the power of God, how every planet is assembled and standing exactly where they're supposed to stand. And maybe those planets are representing a whole entire power, divine, you know? And
I
so
totally
we're
agree with
just
that.
specks within a
Yeah.
speck, within a speck. So extrapolate all that. Look, the beautiful thing about this, the microbiome, is that it teaches us that if you lack diversity in your gut, you're having a disease. You're going to have a disease. You're going to be immunosuppressed because you've lost microbes. Okay. So the idea of killing a group of microbes starts a disease process. Now, think about humanity as a whole. We all survive as humans because we each have different traits that we bring to the planet. Now, you kill a region, you've killed humanity,
Mhm.
right? Because now the planet, you kill a region of the planet, right? You kill the Amazon jungle. Now the planet is out of whack, right?
Absolutely.
You melt down Iceland. Now the planet's out of whack, right? The water's going to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So we've got to start thinking as, start taking it from the microbiome that teaches us that loss of diversity creates disease. Now, loss of diversity of humans creates a diseased humanity.
Mhm.
Loss of diversity of the planet and regions creates a diseased planet. And there's nowhere to go for that diseased planet than to go extinct. So, this is where we're heading,
Yeah.
on the bigger picture. Is that why planets disappear? Maybe they get themselves to the level of losing the diversity and therefore disappearing. Maybe. Again,
Maybe.
we're just specks on this planet. So your role of having breast cancer is to was an awakening. It
Yes.
was your mission. It became
Yes.
your passion. It became your mission. This was a role that was given to you. My role of asking God, where do we go after we die, got me into this healthcare revolution. I didn't want to be in this healthcare revolution, but I felt that God trained me along the way. I was the perfect person for that because I was the girl that was beaten up in high school. Like, I can't be a doctor, beaten up in residency. You're never going to be a gastroenterologist, beaten up in GI. You're never going to figure out the microbiome. It's always no, no, no. And we're going to put this roadblock and this roadblock and this roadblock, and we're going to make it extremely challenging that you need to do this research and you need a lot of funds. And how are you going to get the funds without being biased, right? And we're also going to challenge you in your life, create, trolls to just aggravate you and problems, So it's all, at the end of the day, we all have a job. I know my job, healthcare revolution. I didn't want to be a healthcare revolution, but I think I'm the wake up call to humanity that basically says, wake up, you're going to be a patient. Interfere with research is going to affect you. So stop interfering with research. Start being righteous. There's a lot of money that can be made in healing the planet, in healing the microbiome. We do not need to just keep destroying.
Dr. Hazan, I know we're getting close to,
Yes, yes,
we've
because
been
I'm
talking for
impatient.
so ever. Stacey would have had us off the air by now.
Yes, yes.
But I'm so excited to know you. And I think that this microbiome profiling can absolutely personalize cancer care, Alzheimer's, like the whole spectrum. And I am totally into giving you some stool samples and and,
Perfect,
and
perfect. So
being your
call.
being
Yeah.
your guinea pig or whatever they call lab rats. Just make
Well, we
sure I
just
get
need a stool sample. We
yeah
don't need a
okay.
kidney. So it's not, you're
Thank you.
releasing it anyways.
Make sure I just get 3 square meals a day.
Yes,
But you and I seem to have been brought together through God because
yes,
when I got cancer, I did the why me. Now I founded and co-founded growingtogive.org. We're all about feeding communities through agricultural technologies that are God centric. And we grow in spirals. My husband is the inventor of the crop circle farm systems.
Nice.
grow in spirals, and we grow a lot of food in a very natural way. We don't
Nice.
need pesticides. The food is
Nice.
organic, and there's no bad bugs that bother
Amazing.
the plants because of the spirals. And I thought that that was my gift from God. And I realized that breast cancer is, because now I can amplify voices like yours. We can find ways to cure. And I know, oh, like YouTube does not want me to say cure, but
Well,
we
we can
should
at
be
least,
able
we
to.
can, I think we can at least prolong,
Mm,
the suffering, prolong the not suffering, you
not
know what I
suffering.
mean? Prolong life, I think if we can prolong life with, there's no such thing as a cure, in my opinion, because, you know, we're all gonna die. This is there's one truth in life, and that's we're all gonna die.
Yeah,
So it's just a matter of, extending the life, right? To live. I had a pancreatic cancer patient that lived 8 years. And she lived 8 years because I was working on her gut. At the time, I didn't really know that I was working on her gut, and that's why she was living 8 years. She lived 8 years. But she sent me a beautiful note. It was a letter before she died, a couple days before she died, and she thanked me for giving her 8 years where she could see her granddaughter grow and attended her daughter's graduation from college. And, you know, those are the moments that, I'm proud about in my life, where I did my job. I extended someone's life to just for them to see those epic moments that we all live for, the wedding of a child, the graduation, the birth of a grandchild. So I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, feeling like we've done it, right? I mean, I think one of the aspirations in my life is to leave the planet and thinking I did my best. I left it as I did a good job. I saved a lot of lives. I lost no one during COVID. That's something to be proud of.
very good.
And doing good every day, right? And then
Yeah.
I can leave the planet in peace till the next battlefield when I come back again, probably, if there is an afterlife, right? I
Uh,
think some of us are destined to just come back to restore the balance of the planet or the planets. Who knows?
Absolutely.
There's a lot to be learned. There's a lot to know, and there's a lot of mysteries to life. And I think it's a mistake to just stop the knowledge, to stop the asking the questions, to stop, the innovations. And, why criticize people? Come up with your own ideas. Everything goes, freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom, period. That's what we all live for as humans. And we've been branded that. So
And where do we find your book and
so
your work?
ProgenaBiome.com.
Okay, great.
I'm also so people could support the microbiome research foundation.org. That's how we do our research. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, Sabine Hazan, Hazan, MD. And that's it. Okay.
Well, you have to come back, and maybe
Yes.
I'll
Well,
send in
when we get your stools, we
so
can
we can
showcase
look
your
at that.
stools on the podcast.
We can definitely do that.
It's all in color. So it's all in colors. So we put the bacteria in different colors so that you can see the groups of microbes that you have and the groups of microbes you've lost.
Now, I have a great oncologist. She's one of the top in her field, and I'm going to ask her next time I see her if she knows of you, because I think she'd be very interested in your research. And, when you have cancer, you feel out of control. But having an understanding of what you're researching and why, and the connection to the divine, I have no doubt that God has his hand on your shoulder and is working through you. And thank you
And,
for,
and
for
through
sharing
you, by the
today.
way, too. Through you.
Thank you.
So, when you have faith, when you have God, it's an easy path, no matter what you go through. So just have faith and trust because everything happens for a reason. And we may not understand the reason right now in this life, but, we understand it later, because look how many times I've seen a person dying, but then their death saved another person's life, right?
Yes.
Because it was an awareness. A friend of mine, her best friend died of melanoma, and then she became aware of melanoma. And really, her best friend died to save her because she ended up having an early diagnosis of melanoma. So sometimes we don't understand why things happen, but they happen because, unfortunately, there's a reason, and sometimes there are no reasons because man is just corrupt, and so we have to rebalance that corruption. And I tend to think that corruption anyways is probably loss of microbes as well, because a person with a balanced microbiome would never want to kill another person, would never want to hurt another person, would never want to, take away possessions of another person and put them in the poorhouse. So I think we live in a world that's good and bad, like the good and bad microbes. So our goal is to kind of keep the balance and suffocate the bad, like the bifidobacteria suffocates the bad. That's the goal, anyways.
Well,
It
Dr.
was a
Sabine Hazan,
pleasure.
thank you so much for joining Cancer Bites, and we
Thank
will
you.
see you back here again. We'll connect offline. And for everybody watching, I want you to know that you are seen, you are supported, and you're definitely not alone. And that is why Cancer Bites was put on my heart, and I will do everything I can to bring you amazing voices like Dr. Hazan's. And let's just make our life worth something. Leave legacies. Don't be afraid. Reach out and support each other. Talk about your cancer. The more we talk about what we're dealing with, the more researchers like Dr. Sabine, she has information she can pull from that. Now she looks at my family history and she's probably like, oh, okay, you know, that will help her. And then she'll see my stool sample and that'll be thrilling. But every little bit counts. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was a pleasure.
This has been Cancer Bites. Real people, real life with cancer. Take what you need, leave what you don't, and come back when you're ready. Cancer doesn't define us, but our voices do. On behalf of Stacey and Siobhan, see you next bite.